A continent of silence lies beyond the storms, veiled in the white breath of eternity. It is a place where compasses falter, where the horizon folds back upon itself, and where human maps end in uncertainty. They call it Antarctica, but to speak its name is to reduce its enormity to a syllable too small for its vast and frozen heart. At its edges, the ice wall rises like the boundary of an ancient kingdom, a rampart that holds back something not yet meant to be known. Who placed this wall? Who keeps it intact against the gnawing teeth of time and weather? Who guards it now, in the secrecy of a land no ship may freely wander? History whispers faintly of expeditions that turned back with more questions than answers. The logs of explorers, the murmured accounts of aviators, the clipped phrases buried in archives, all point to shadows behind the glacial curtain. Some said it was only nature's design, a theater of wind and ice sculpted by indifferent physics. Yet others suggested an architecture, a hidden intention, as if the wall was not merely ice but memory itself, frozen into a barrier against intrusion. The cold does not reveal. It absorbs. It holds silence with the weight of centuries. And those who approached too closely have often found their voices lost to snowdrift and storm. Welcome to ARCHAEON. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The wind across the Southern Ocean has no anchor. It rushes unbroken, circumnavigating the globe without the interruption of land, gathering speed and sorrow until it crashes against the first defenses of Antarctica. There, the ocean becomes a churning field of icebergs, each one like a fragment of a secret shattered and set adrift. It was in this desolate ring of waters that the first whispers of the ice wall were caught in the journals of sailors, written in hands trembling from cold and uncertainty. They recorded not only the blinding cliffs of ice that barred their passage, but the feeling, an oppressive stillness, as though unseen eyes pressed against the back of their necks. The question was never only about ice. It was about guardianship. Something seemed to linger there, a force that repelled entry, whether human or elemental. When Captain James Cook ventured further south than most dared in the 1770s, his logs did not describe mythical continents of lush fields, but rather the suffocating absence of life. He spoke of endless barriers of ice stretching beyond vision, of waters rendered unnavigable by frozen masses. Though Cook did not claim discovery of the continent itself, his testimony gave voice to the rumor. The Antarctic was a world set apart, encircled by its ramparts of ice. Centuries later, when Richard Evelyn Byrd soared over these walls in the age of flight, his carefully chosen words suggested encounters too profound to be spoken plainly. He called it a land of mystery, a phrase that sounds almost quaint, until one considers that mystery in such a context is not a luxury, but a warning. Some readers of his reports wondered why his descriptions alternated between awe and reserve, as if he were both compelled to speak and restrained from saying too much. Why did explorers write with such measured hands when speaking of Antarctica, compared to the exuberance that colored their accounts of other uncharted realms? Was it only the blankness of the place that demanded caution, or something more? The Antarctic Treaty of 1959, signed by nations with otherwise little in common, prohibited military activity, resource claims, and most human settlement on the continent. On its surface, the treaty was heralded as a triumph of peace. Yet some have asked why, in a century marked by competition for territory and power, the most forbidding land of all was the only one that all agreed should remain untouched. Is there peace in isolation, or was something being cordoned off beneath the guise of cooperation? If one follows the trail of speculation, a pattern emerges, not from fantasy, but from echoes. Ancient maps, such as the Piri Reis chart of 1513, have been scrutinized for their uncanny resemblance to an ice-free Antarctica. Scholars debate whether the contours of the southern landmass were somehow known long before any modern expedition reached those latitudes. Could civilizations, now forgotten, have once glimpsed the continent before it was sealed beneath its frozen shroud? Or were these maps fragments of an inheritance passed down, guarded like embers from a fire that had long since been extinguished? The presence of those cartographic anomalies unsettles the linearity of history, suggesting that knowledge can be lost as well as gained, that humanity is not always moving forward but circling around mysteries older than memory. The ice wall itself, as described in accounts, carries a dual symbolism. It is both barrier and mirror. Physically, it blocks the seafarer from penetrating deeper, its cliffs towering like fortresses of frozen stone. Metaphorically, it reflects the limits of human ambition. Each time a vessel turned back, each time an expedition faltered, the wall seemed less like an accident of geology and more like a line deliberately drawn. Who could draw such a line? If nature, why does it feel so intentional? If not nature, then who or what has reason to guard that threshold? In the silence of the polar night, the continent becomes a vast monochrome stage where speculation plays freely. Some have imagined hidden entrances in the ice, passages leading into caverns warmed by geothermal currents, vast enough to harbor forgotten ecosystems or remnants of earlier epochs. The concept is not mere fantasy. Scientists have discovered subglacial lakes sealed for millions of years beneath kilometers of ice, their waters untouched by sunlight yet teeming with microbial life. If such hidden pockets exist, untouched by time, what else might remain preserved or concealed within them? Each borehole drilled into the Antarctic crust becomes not only an act of science, but an intrusion into a vault that nature, or something beyond nature, has kept locked. History offers curious parallels. In myth and sacred texts, boundaries of ice and mountains often demarcate forbidden lands, the edge of the world where gods or giants reside. The Norse spoke of Jotunheim beyond the icy rivers, while in apocryphal texts of Christianity, there are mentions of realms sealed at the ends of the earth. The idea of guardianship recurs, watchers placed to ensure that what lies beyond remains inaccessible to humankind. Are these merely metaphors of the psyche, or coded memories of places once known but later obscured? If the collective human imagination has always conjured walls at the edge of the world, could Antarctica's ramparts be the last echo of a truth half remembered? The tension deepens when one considers the political climate of the 20th century. Operation Highjump, in 1946-47, led by Admiral Byrd, sent a formidable fleet of ships, aircraft, and thousands of personnel to Antarctica under the guise of scientific exploration. The sheer scale of the operation raised questions. Was it only for science, or was there an urgency hidden in its mandate? Byrd himself later spoke cryptically of threats that could come from the polar regions, threats with the capacity to strike the United States swiftly. His remarks were quietly absorbed into reports, then dismissed, but they left behind a residue of unease. Why would Antarctica be framed as a theater of potential menace? What did Byrd see, or believe he saw, that demanded such veiled caution? Mainstream accounts suggest the operation faced logistical challenges, harsh weather, and the natural dangers of the environment. Yet alternative interpretations circulate, whispering of encounters that went beyond mere climate and terrain. These whispers linger not because they are proven, but because they refuse to vanish. They cling to the cracks of official history like frost that never melts, demanding to be acknowledged even as they are denied. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Antarctic enigma is the way it resists closure. Unlike other frontiers that yielded to colonization, Antarctica remains shielded, preserved in a state of suspension. Human presence is limited, transient, never allowed to root. The continent does not permit the permanent gaze. Even research stations, though established, exist like outposts in exile, their survival dependent on resupply, their futures never secure. It is as if the land itself enforces a law. You may observe, but you may not possess. The ice wall continues to loom, both literal and symbolic. For the sailor, it is a cliff of frozen time, halting progress. For the dreamer, it is a threshold to the unknown. And for the historian, it is a reminder that not all boundaries are meant to be crossed. The guardianship of the wall may not belong to sentient beings in the way the human mind conceives, yet there is a guardianship nonetheless. Whether imposed by natural law, ancient design, or unseen watchmen, it functions with precision. It says, "Here and no further." Still, questions accumulate like snow upon the barrier. Why does the continent inspire both reverence and restriction? Why do the oldest maps gesture toward knowledge that should not exist? Why did the most ambitious nations of the earth suddenly agree to leave untouched the very ground they once longed to claim? Each answer offered only folds back into deeper mystery, as if the wall itself were teaching a lesson in humility, that not all can be owned, that not all should be known, and so the guardians remain unnamed. Perhaps they are nothing more than the cold, the wind, and the silence, forces too vast for humanity to overcome. Or perhaps they are something older, less forgiving, ensuring that whatever lies beyond the rampart remains veiled. The night over the southern ice is long, and its shadows are patient. In that patience, a strange comfort arises. Not every secret must be unveiled at once. Some may wait beyond the lifespans of empires, beyond the memory of nations, until the earth itself decides to reveal them. For now, the wall endures, and those who stand before it feel both diminished and expanded. Diminished in power, expanded in wonder. The sea crashes against it, explorers retreat from it, scholars debate about it, and yet it remains unyielding. Perhaps the guardianship is not of something hidden behind, but of us, keeping humanity from a knowledge it is not yet prepared to carry. The ice reflects us back to ourselves, showing the thinness of our dominion, the fragility of our certainty. And in that reflection lies the most haunting question of all. Is the wall waiting to be breached, or is it waiting to outlast us? Night in the southern hemisphere drapes the sky like a shroud, the auroras breathing pale curtains of light above the desolation. In such silence, Antarctica becomes more than geography. It becomes a question, a mirror to humanity's longing for forbidden knowledge. Where the ice wall rises, not as a frozen accident, but as a deliberate presence, the mind begins to wander beyond what is permitted. The earliest explorers who skirted its fringes were not the only ones to sense that veil. Long before ships with iron hulls and compasses dared the latitude of eternal cold, stories had already moved through the veins of human memory. Stories of lands concealed at the world's edge, where boundaries were drawn not by men, but by cosmic decree. The Piri Reis map remains one of those troubling fragments. Unearthed in Istanbul in 1929, it shows the outlines of the South American coast with astonishing accuracy, centuries before modern surveying tools were conceived. But most unsettling of all is the faint suggestion of a southern landmass that bears striking resemblance to Antarctica, without its ice. Mainstream historians argue over misinterpretations, over the amalgamation of earlier maps from unknown sources, yet the presence of such contours raises the possibility that a different form of knowledge once circulated, belonging to civilizations whose records have been erased. Could they have known Antarctica in a different age, when its coasts were free of their icy armor, when it was not a continent sealed from the world but a shore open to passage? If so, then the ice wall becomes not simply a barrier, but a witness, a monument to a transformation older than our history books allow. In the whispers of esoteric traditions, one encounters echoes of this possibility. Plato spoke of Atlantis, a land drowned and forgotten, but described not only destruction, but preservation. What if the preservation was not beneath water, but beneath ice? Ancient Hindu texts tell of cycles, of yugas in which the earth resets itself, civilizations rising and falling in rhythms far larger than our fragile sense of time. In such a vision, Antarctica's ice could be more than climate. It could be an epical curtain drawn across the remnants of an earlier world. If so, what secrets lie sealed beneath that curtain? Fossils discovered along the Transantarctic mountains suggest that forests once grew there, teeming with life. Fragments of plants, impressions of leaves. These are not inventions, but physical records, testifying that the land was not always barren. Life breathed here once, and perhaps something more than life. Modern science has confirmed what ancient whispers intuited. Antarctica was once warm. Geological studies reveal traces of subtropical flora preserved in layers deep beneath the current freeze. The continent has shifted, continental drift drawing it into its present prison of cold. Yet to imagine it as once fertile is to disturb our neat divisions of history. What if human footprints once touched its soil? What if the knowledge preserved in old maps was not myth, but memory? The wall of ice becomes then a tomb, not empty, but sealed with intention, locking away a past that does not fit the chronology we recite. Operation Highjump resurfaces in this light with a peculiar resonance. Admiral Byrd led thousands of men, aircraft, and naval vessels in what was officially a scientific mission. Yet the urgency, the scale, the secrecy surrounding certain outcomes have long troubled observers. Byrd returned with words that hinted at threats and technologies beyond comprehension, spoken in interviews, then softened by the official record. He spoke of flying machines capable of speeds far beyond conventional craft, of forces that could project themselves from polar regions with devastating swiftness. His warnings were not amplified but quietly absorbed, dismissed as exaggerations. Still, fragments linger in public memory, enough to seed suspicion that Antarctica concealed more than mere ice and rock. If the wall is a boundary, was Operation Highjump an attempt to cross it, or to negotiate with those who guard it? Conflicting interpretations abound. Some dismiss Byrd's statements as propaganda in the early Cold War climate, designed to instill vigilance against unseen enemies. Others see them as distorted echoes of something witnessed, yet unexplainable, transmuted into vague language because precise language was forbidden. And here lies the tension. When evidence is cloaked in ambiguity, suspicion thrives. The Antarctic Treaty followed not long after, an international agreement that froze claims, forbade militarization, and locked the continent into a strange stasis. Nations that competed bitterly elsewhere suddenly agreed upon silence here. Why this exception? Was it merely the impracticality of colonizing a frozen desert, or the recognition of a secret best kept veiled? The human mind resists a vacuum. Where silence falls, it fills the gaps with memory, myth, suspicion. Thus, Antarctica becomes a canvas, painted with theories of hidden bases, of lost civilizations entombed, of gateways to inner worlds. Hollow Earth theorists point to accounts of warm currents and unexpected oases, of strange anomalies in compass readings, as if the continent were not what it appears but a facade for something beneath. Though mainstream science rejects such claims, the persistence of these narratives reveals something deeper. A longing to reconcile the known with the hinted, the visible with the concealed. Even the most rational mind, confronted with the sheer scale of Antarctic silence, feels the itch of possibility. The guardians of the ice wall, whether one imagines them as geological forces, as ancient architects, or as entities still present, emerge as figures of paradox. They are protectors and jailers, ensuring that what lies beyond remains intact, untouched by premature curiosity. Their existence, literal or symbolic, explains the uncanny harmony by which the most aggressive nations of the modern world agreed to suspend their hunger for conquest. It was as though an unspoken acknowledgement circulated among them that here, ambition must pause. But why? Was it reverence or fear? Some scholars have attempted to interpret Antarctica through the lens of collective unconscious. Carl Jung suggested that archetypes emerge from the depths of the psyche, recurring across cultures. The ice wall could be such an archetype, the image of a threshold beyond which lies the forbidden. Yet when myth and physical reality coincide, the wall in the psyche mirrored by the wall in the world, the effect is destabilizing. The subconscious insists it is not only symbol, but fact, a presence that commands respect. And so humanity circles the continent, studies it from above, drills cautiously, but does not claim dominion. The guardianship holds. Geology itself, though rational and material, becomes eerie when viewed through this lens. Beneath the ice, radar scans reveal mountains higher than the Alps, valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon. These hidden landscapes, unseen by human eyes, exist as phantoms, known only through instruments. They are there, yet inaccessible, wrapped in the cold armor of millennia. What could be preserved within those basins? What narratives of the earth itself might be locked in those hidden folds? Each discovery only enlarges the question, never closes it. The more science uncovers, the more the guardians seem to retreat further inward, withholding the final revelation. The wall stands as both an obstacle and a promise. For some, it promises only the monotony of frozen geology. For others, it whispers of archives untouched, of truths that would reorder the known story of humankind. It has always been thus with thresholds. To the skeptic, they are boundaries of stone. To the seeker, they are gates. Which is Antarctica? The difference may depend not on the land, but on the readiness of those who approach it. Even now, satellites circling above capture images that seem to shift, anomalies that ignite speculation. Unusual geometric forms, shadows that suggest structures rather than accidents of nature. Each photograph sparks debate, then is explained away, then resurfaces in another form. The guardianship is not silent. It provokes. It leaves traces, like footprints in snow that the wind half erases but never fully hides. Perhaps this is intentional. Perhaps the wall is meant to be questioned but not breached, a paradoxical invitation to wonder without possession. A teacher cloaked in silence. And as the auroras dance above the continent, one is reminded that the sky itself participates in the mystery. Charged particles paint veils of green and violet over the ice, as though signaling that even the heavens conspire to keep the land below unearthly. Light becomes another guardian, dazzling the gaze so that clarity never arrives. What lies beneath remains beneath, and we are left with riddles instead of revelations. So the question returns, like a tide that never recedes. Who guards the ice wall? The answer may never be given in words. It may only be felt in the awe of those who turned back, in the unease of those who signed treaties, in the silence of maps that show what should not be known. Guardianship may not be a presence we can name, but a condition we cannot escape. The ice holds its dominion, and in its dominion it reflects the fragility of our certainties. Perhaps then the true secret is not what lies behind the wall, but what the wall does to us. It confronts us with our hunger for knowledge, our impatience with mystery, our inability to accept boundaries. In resisting us, it teaches us. And in teaching us, it whispers the most disquieting truth, that not all is meant to be revealed in this age. The wall stands, the guardians endure, and we are left to wonder in the shadows of their silence. The first breath of dawn on the Antarctic horizon is not color, but absence. A dim silver glow bleeds into the edges of perpetual night, reflecting upon the jagged surface of ice as though the continent itself were exhaling after eons of silence. In such a moment, the ice wall is no longer just a fortress but a threshold. It waits. Yet what does it wait for? That question, left hanging in the air since the age of Cook and Bird, has carried into the very marrow of modern thought, intertwining history, science, and myth until the distinctions dissolve like fog. The guardianship of the wall, whether natural or deliberate, forces humanity to gaze inward as much as outward, compelling us to examine why this frozen barrier has remained unconquered when so much else in the world has yielded to human hunger. Consider the maps, those stubborn fragments of earlier knowledge. The Oronce-Finet map of 1531, long before the icebound continent was officially sighted, depicted a southern landmass labeled Terra Australis. Later, the Boache map of 1737 suggested a divided Antarctica, echoing the very mountain ranges and valleys discovered by modern radar beneath kilometers of ice. To dismiss these cartographic anomalies as coincidence is convenient, yet their persistence invites unease. If these maps drew upon older sources, whose eyes had measured the land before it was hidden? Could there have been civilizations capable of traversing oceans and recording the contours of lands that modern humanity would not rediscover until centuries later? If so, the ice wall ceases to be mere accident. It becomes a curtain drawn over memory itself, as though the Earth conspires to hide its earlier chapters from us. The weight of this possibility grows heavier when one recalls the stories of ancient cataclysms. The Sumerian king list, etched into clay, speaks of reigns that lasted thousands of years, then ended in a flood. The Popol Vuh, sacred text of the Kichi Maya, describes cycles of creation and destruction, with worlds erased and remade. In both, there is the sense of erasure, of history buried under water or fire, or perhaps ice. If Antarctica once stood open, fertile, and inhabited, then the wall of ice becomes not just geology but consequence, an aftermath of some cosmic event, a veil drawn to seal what survived beneath. Guardianship, in this light, may be the Earth's own response, a way of protecting itself from the intrusion of a species that forgets as quickly as it learns. The evidence of warmth beneath the cold lends further weight to these thoughts. Scientists drilling into Lake Vostok discovered a body of water sealed beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, isolated for millions of years. What thrives there remains largely unknown, but the very discovery is a reminder that the continent is not lifeless but layered, containing ecosystems untouched by the present age. Volcanic activity has been confirmed beneath the ice, creating geothermal oases where the temperature is far warmer than the surface suggests. These facts are accepted within mainstream science, yet when viewed through the lens of speculation, they become doorways. If life persists beneath, if warmth circulates where cold should reign, might there not also be remnants of something older? Structures, artifacts, or even memories of human or pre-human presence sealed within? The ice wall, then, is not only a perimeter but a lock, a threshold that can be crossed only by those who endure the weight of mystery. Whispers of discovery have emerged, though never in forms that the official record would sanctify. Accounts circulate of anomalous structures glimpsed in satellite imagery, of geometric shadows beneath the ice, of unusual metallic fragments recovered during drilling. Each story, when brought to light, is swiftly cloaked again in dismissal, explained away as pixelation, pareidolia, contamination. Yet the frequency with which such claims emerge, only to be buried, creates a rhythm of concealment. If nothing lies beyond the ice, why the recurring pattern of silence? Perhaps the guardianship is not only natural, but institutional, with governments and agencies serving as extensions of a deeper law, concealment, until the appointed time. The Treaty of 1959 becomes uncanny when viewed in this context. In a world fragmented by ideological struggle, it represents one of the rare unifying accords. Why here? Why this place? The language of science and cooperation cloaks it in noble terms, yet beneath those terms lies an unsettling implication, that the continent is to remain untouched, not merely for peace, but for secrecy. Researchers may study, but only within bounds. Nations may visit, but not claim. This is guardianship expressed in human law, mirroring the guardianship already inscribed in the ice. It is as though humanity was compelled to formalize a covenant it did not fully understand, drawn into compliance with something greater than itself. Admiral Byrd's words after Operation Highjump still resonate in this frame. He spoke of dangers that could strike with unprecedented speed from polar regions. He spoke of a new kind of war, one against an enemy that was not defined by borders. These statements, softened or forgotten, linger like faint tracks in the snow. Was he describing only the harshness of the environment, or something else glimpsed during those months of expedition? The operation itself ended abruptly, months earlier than intended, with vague explanations of logistical failures. Yet speculation thrives in the silence. Was there an encounter, something that could not be explained, something that reinforced the necessity of the treaty that followed? The guardianship grows more tangible when considered against such shadows. What if the ice wall is not only physical, but defended by those unseen, ensuring that its veil remains intact? One need not imagine extraterrestrials or lost gods to feel the weight of these questions. The guardianship may be as simple and as unfathomable as the planet itself. Earth is not passive. It shifts, quakes, erupts, freezes. It creates and erases landscapes over spans of time incomprehensible to human memory. The ice wall may be the Earth's own mechanism, its way of resetting the balance, of ensuring that certain knowledge remains out of reach until humanity proves capable of carrying it. This is a guardianship without malice, yet it feels deliberate. The wall resists not because it hates, but because it must, and in that resistance it becomes more than ice. It becomes an idea, an emblem of limitation. The resonance of this idea in mythology is uncanny. The Greek poets spoke of Hyperborea, a land beyond the north wind where mortals could not tread, guarded by cold and inaccessible by sea. The Norse spoke of the ice realm of Niflheim, a place beyond reach, filled with fog and guarded by forces unknown. Across cultures, across ages, the human mind returns again and again to the notion of forbidden polar lands, guarded by barriers of ice or storm. When these archetypes align with the actual physical presence of Antarctica's wall, the distinction between myth and history begins to blur. The guardianship described in ancient tales may not have been invention, but memory transmuted into metaphor, carried forward until it resurfaced in our own time as physical truth. And yet, mainstream voices insist upon restraint. The continent is dangerous, they say, not mysterious. The ice wall is geology, not design. The treaty is practicality, not conspiracy. To accept this explanation is to choose simplicity, to rest within the comfort of a world that remains charted and comprehensible. But why then do the questions not dissolve? Why do the maps persist? The anomalies recur, the testimonies linger. The guardianship resists dismissal as surely as it resists entry. Even denial becomes part of its design, another layer of ice over the truth. The climax of this paradox lies not in discovery, but in confrontation with our own limits. Antarctica stands as a mirror to the human condition. It shows us how little we control, how fragile our sense of mastery. The guardianship of the ice wall may be inscrutable, but in its inscrutability lies its power. It humbles us. It forces us to reckon with mystery not as a flaw to be corrected, but as an element of existence itself. We are not entitled to all knowledge, not yet. Some truths remain veiled, and the veil itself is the lesson. As the pale sun ascends briefly above the horizon before sinking again into the long polar night, the ice glows with a light that is neither warm nor cold, but something in between, an indifferent radiance. It shines not to illuminate, but to remind. The wall stands, the guardians endure, the questions persist, and humanity, standing before this silent frontier, is left with nothing but wonder. Perhaps this is the true purpose of the wall, not to conceal but to teach patience, to let us feel in the marrow of our being the weight of what cannot yet be known. There are places on earth where silence feels alive, where it does not merely mark the absence of sound, but becomes a presence of its own. Antarctica is such a place. Beyond the barrier of ice, the wind howls and the snow drifts, but within the hollows of its mountains and valleys, the silence presses like a weight against the human mind. It is in this silence that rumors grow, as though the land itself plants them. The ice wall, seen from the deck of a ship or the cockpit of an aircraft, looms like a fortress, but it is not only its immensity that unsettles. It is the sense that something beyond it does not want to be seen. In earlier ages, such thoughts might have been dismissed as superstition. Yet, time and again, the deeper humanity peers into the continent, the more enigmas surface. The guardianship of the ice wall is not passive. It is active, compelling us to retreat, compelling us to ask questions without answering them. In 1838, the United States launched the U.S. exploring expedition under Charles Wilkes, seeking to chart the southern hemisphere. What they reported was not only a vast coastline of ice, but strange illusions of land masses shifting in and out of sight, mirages that gave the impression of continents where none existed. Some dismissed these as tricks of light, the atmosphere refracting images across the horizon. Yet the persistence of these visions troubled even seasoned navigators. Was it the mind reaching for shapes in the void? Or was the continent itself cloaking its presence in illusions, revealing and concealing at will? The guardianship, whether natural or intentional, seemed to play with perception itself, leaving even the most rational observers uncertain of what they had witnessed. Decades later, the Antarctic mystery deepened with the stories surrounding Byrd's later expeditions. Operation Deep Freeze in the 1950s laid the foundation for permanent research stations. And yet, in Byrd's public interviews, he returned again to the theme of strangeness. He spoke of the most important place in the world for science and hinted at resources beyond imagination. His words suggested not only untapped wealth, but something more. An awareness that Antarctica was more than barren wasteland. His tone oscillated between scientific wonder and guarded restraint, as though he knew more than he could speak. Was he describing minerals beneath the ice, or was he speaking of something less material, something guarded? The vagueness leaves behind a residue of unease. Silence once again performs its guardianship, erasing the edges of truth while allowing only shadows to remain. At the same time, science began to pull back veils of its own. In 1957, during the International Geophysical Year, seismic surveys revealed that beneath the ice lay not just mountains, but a complex geography, valleys and ridges that mirrored the features of other continents. Among these discoveries was the Gamburtsev mountain range, hidden entirely under kilometers of ice, a chain the size of the Alps buried out of sight. Their existence raised questions that remain unanswered. How could mountains so vast form and then be completely sealed away without human history ever recording their presence? What else might be buried in such hidden ranges? The guardianship of the ice wall is not only its visible cliffs, but the concealment of landscapes beneath, as though entire worlds have been folded away into secrecy. This concealment is echoed in myths across the globe. In Tibetan lore, the land of Shambhala lies hidden beyond mountains, inaccessible to ordinary travelers, guarded until a future age. In Native American traditions, there are stories of peoples retreating beneath the earth, surviving catastrophes in hidden caverns. In each myth, guardians protect the threshold, allowing only the worthy or the prepared to pass. When such stories are read beside the revelations of Antarctica, its hidden lakes, its buried mountains, its inaccessible valleys, they seem less like fantasies and more like memory transposed into metaphor. The guardians of the ice wall may not wear faces or wield weapons, but they perform the same role as the watchers of myth. They preserve what lies beyond until the time comes for revelation. The mid-20th century also gave rise to darker interpretations. The Second World War ended with rumors of Nazi interest in Antarctica, of expeditions establishing bases in the frozen wilderness. Official records confirmed that Germany mounted an expedition in 1938-39, claiming parts of Queen Maud Land and photographing swaths of the icy coast. What remains speculative are the accounts that followed, whispers of underground facilities, of research beyond the limits of conventional technology, and of post-war retreats into the polar shadows. Operation Highjump, occurring just years later, has been interpreted by some as a response to such rumors, a projection of power into the frozen South. Whether these claims hold truth or not, the pattern is undeniable. Antarctica repeatedly emerges as a stage for secrecy, where the boundaries of official history blur into something less stable, more troubling. The guardianship here seems not only natural but political, ensuring that what occurred remains entombed in silence. Yet science, in its slow persistence, continues to press against the wall. Radar imaging in recent decades has revealed subglacial lakes like Lake Mercer and Lake Whillans, ecosystems that may have been sealed off for hundreds of thousands of years. When researchers drilled into Lake Whillans in 2013, they discovered not emptiness, but microbial life thriving in the dark, proving that even in the absence of light and heat, life persists. These findings, though celebrated, also unsettle. If life can survive there, cut off from the surface, what other forms of existence might be preserved in the continent's hidden chambers? Could remnants of earlier worlds linger, frozen yet alive, waiting in silence? Each new discovery complicates the picture, expanding the sense that Antarctica conceals far more than it reveals. The guardianship of the ice wall thus operates on multiple levels: physical, political, mythological, psychological. It is a place where perception falters, where science uncovers anomalies faster than it can explain them, where history hints at events left deliberately obscure. And always, the treaty stands, a legal manifestation of guardianship, ensuring that no nation or corporation pierces too deeply into the continent's heart. The words of the treaty speak of peace, but its effect is exclusion. The land is preserved, but preserved against what? The guardianship here does not only protect Antarctica from us, it protects us from Antarctica. Conflict arises in the clash between the explanations. Official voices insist on practicality. The treaty prevents exploitation. The wall is ice. The anomalies are natural. Yet the persistence of alternative interpretations cannot be erased. When myths, maps, and modern science converge upon the same locus of mystery, the result is not clarity, but amplification. Each explanation offered only deepens the silence. Each denial becomes another form of guardianship, preventing the mystery from collapsing under the weight of certainty. The ice wall becomes not merely a physical structure, but an idea sustained by contradictions, an eternal riddle carved into the edge of the world. What then is the climax of such a narrative? It is not revelation, but confrontation with the unknown. Antarctica refuses to yield itself fully. The guardianship holds, whether by natural law or unseen will. The continent endures as a mirror in which humanity sees its own restlessness, its own hunger for answers, its own impatience with silence. And in that mirror, something unsettling stares back. The recognition that some mysteries are not failures of knowledge, but conditions of existence. Antarctica's ice wall is not only a barrier to exploration, but a lesson in humility. It reminds us that our maps, our instruments, our treaties, all are fragile before the immensity of time and silence. As the long polar twilight deepens once again, shadows stretch across the frozen ramparts. The auroras ignite above, their green light shimmering against the white cliffs, as though the sky itself has become a veil of guardianship. And in that moment, one feels the presence of an ancient covenant, that what lies beyond the wall remains hidden, not because it is lost, but because it waits. The guardians endure, the silence speaks, and the questions echo across the endless snow. Not when will the wall fall, but whether humanity will ever be ready to see what lies behind it. The sea around the southern latitudes churns with a violence unmatched elsewhere, a ceaseless storm ring that seems less like weather and more like defense. Ancient mariners spoke of the furious 50s and screaming 60s, the latitudes where winds circumnavigate the globe unbroken by land. It is no coincidence that these winds spiral around the Antarctic barrier, forming an invisible moat. The guardianship of the ice wall is not merely physical, it is elemental. Even before a ship's hull or an aircraft's wing reaches the cliffs of ice, the elements conspire to drive it back. Nature itself, or something older guiding nature, creates a threshold. Those who cross into the south feel they have trespassed against an order deeper than law. Yet there were always those who pushed forward. In 1820, Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, a captain of the Imperial Russian Navy, recorded the sight of an ice field so vast it seemed endless, glimpsing perhaps the first confirmation of the continent itself. His notes spoke of eternal ice and impossible passage. The words betray more than description. They convey awe and dread. He stood at the edge of a world meant to be hidden. Centuries later, satellites would confirm his impression. Antarctica is a continent defined by walls, its entire perimeter ringed with frozen fortresses that refuse easy approach. The guardianship here is not metaphor, it is manifest. But the wall, like all walls, provokes the question of what lies beyond. Stories circulate, not in official journals but in hushed speculations, about warm valleys shielded within the frozen expanse, about volcanic heat creating hidden oases where green life clings to existence. Mainstream science acknowledges some of this. Geothermal activity does create pockets of warmth, and microbial ecosystems thrive where sunlight has never reached. Yet speculation always presses further. What if larger sanctuaries exist? What if these valleys hold remnants of epochs before the ice, when Antarctica was not prison but garden? Fossils of ancient forests, found high in the trans-Antarctic mountains, bear witness to a past unrecognizable from the continent's present form. If forests once grew there, could something else have endured, preserved in silence by the guardianship of the wall? The Piri Reis map lingers like a shadow in this discourse. Scholars debate its origins, its amalgamation of older sources, yet its depiction of an Antarctic coastline free of ice refuses dismissal. If such a map drew from knowledge predating our own, then who charted it? And why does memory of those cartographers vanish into obscurity? It is as though fragments of truth were allowed to surface, only to be swallowed again. The ice wall becomes not only a physical boundary, but a temporal one, severing us from the memory of an earlier world. The guardianship, in this sense, is also forgetfulness, a veil drawn over human history so that the present may proceed without awareness of what has been erased. During the Cold War, Antarctica once more flickered into the sphere of intrigue. Operation Highjump in 1946 ended abruptly, leaving behind whispers of encounters too extraordinary to record in official histories. Admiral Byrd, in his vague but haunting remarks, spoke of forces capable of overwhelming any nation, threats emanating from polar regions that could strike with incredible speed. His language, cautious yet evocative, fed speculation for decades. Some dismissed it as Cold War rhetoric. Others saw in it the echo of something glimpsed, something only half understood. If the guardians of the wall are more than elemental, if they are intentional, then Byrd's words sound less like exaggeration and more like veiled testimony. What kind of power requires such guardianship that even military fleets withdraw in silence? The Antarctic Treaty of 1959, often praised as a triumph of international cooperation, takes on a different hue under this light. Nations that quarreled elsewhere found sudden harmony in declaring the continent off-limits to possession and militarization. On the surface, it was an act of preservation. Yet beneath that surface, one wonders. Preservation of what? Was it the environment or something hidden within it? The treaty enforces a guardianship not unlike the ice wall itself, preventing intrusion by human ambition. No drilling, no mining, no colonization. The continent is to remain veiled, a place of observation but not possession. Such restraint, unusual in human affairs, hints that something deeper is at stake. When myth and policy mirror each other, unease deepens. In countless traditions, sacred places are guarded by gods, spirits, or natural barriers, and entry is forbidden until the seeker has passed a trial or reached a destined time. The Himalayas, the deserts, the oceans, all have been imagined as thresholds to hidden realms. Shambhala, Avalon, Hyperborea. Names given to lands withdrawn from the ordinary world, guarded until humanity is ready. The Antarctic wall fits this archetype with uncanny precision. It is real, visible, measurable, and yet it embodies the same paradox as myth. It forbids, it conceals, it endures. Guardianship may not be anthropomorphic, yet its effect is the same. Humanity stands before the wall and feels in its marrow the instruction. Not yet. In the modern age, technology has only sharpened this paradox. Satellite imagery reveals anomalies, shapes that suggest geometry beneath the ice, shadows that imply structures rather than accidents of nature. Photographs appear, vanish, reappear, often dismissed as errors, illusions, or manipulations. Yet the cycle repeats, leaving behind not clarity but suspicion. Why do such anomalies recur if nothing lies beneath? Why does dismissal feel less like explanation and more like concealment? The guardianship seems to extend even into the digital age, where data itself becomes veiled, obscured just enough to maintain uncertainty. The question then arises: who benefits from the wall remaining unbreached? For science, it provides a controlled laboratory, a rare place where human interference is minimized. For politics, it avoids conflict over resources and territory. But for myth, it preserves mystery itself, ensuring that humanity continues to confront its own boundaries. The guardianship of the wall may therefore serve multiple masters, some human, some not. Its endurance across centuries suggests that whatever force upholds it, whether natural, historical, or intentional, is stronger than curiosity, stronger even than conquest. And yet, curiosity persists. Expeditions continue, drilling, scanning, mapping. Each discovery, rather than resolving the enigma, seems to deepen it. Beneath kilometers of ice, mountains taller than the Alps and valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon hide unseen, landscapes known only to instruments. The sheer scale of what remains concealed dwarfs the fragments revealed. To imagine what else may rest there is to confront the immensity of ignorance. And so the guardianship remains effective, not because it forbids completely, but because it reveals just enough to sustain mystery without granting resolution. In this balance lies the climax of the Antarctic enigma. The ice wall, tangible and visible, becomes the symbol of all thresholds humanity has ever faced. The edge of maps, the edge of memory, the edge of understanding. To confront it is to confront the truth that some knowledge is withheld not by chance, but by necessity. Whether the guardians are nature, gods, or hidden civilizations, their function is the same. They keep the door closed until the appointed time. Humanity may circle the door, may press its ear against the ice, but it may not yet enter. The guardianship holds. As the polar night stretches once more across the continent, the aurora ignites above the wall, casting rippling curtains of light upon the cliffs. They shimmer not as revelation, but as reminder. The world still contains places that resist us, places where silence is stronger than desire. Perhaps this is the true essence of the Antarctic mystery. It is not only about what lies beyond the wall, but about what the wall does to us. It humbles, it unsettles, it compels wonder. And in that wonder, it preserves something fragile, the recognition that not all frontiers are meant to fall. The guardians endure. The wall remains, and the question persists, echoing through the storms that encircle the continent like an endless chant. What is being kept, and who decides when the veil will be lifted? The Antarctic night lingers like an endless breath, a twilight stretched beyond measure, where time itself seems to slow beneath the weight of silence. The ice wall gleams faintly under the auroras, its surface catching green fire and violet flame, as if the heavens themselves were conspiring with the earth to veil what lies behind. For those who gaze upon its vast ramparts, the question does not recede. It deepens. If the guardianship of the wall is real, then it is not a question of whether something is hidden, but why it must remain hidden. And in this dark continent of unanswered questions, humanity's myths, histories, and fears weave into one another until the distinction between past and present collapses into a single shiver of uncertainty. One strand of that uncertainty belongs to memory far older than any explorer's logbook. Fossils discovered in the ice and rock show that Antarctica was once forested, green with cycads and tree ferns, rivers teeming with life. This was not a barren prison of cold, but a fertile landscape, perhaps resembling the lush coasts of modern New Zealand. The fossilized wood, leaves, and pollen tell a story of climates long vanished. And yet the shock lies not only in this fertility, but in its sudden obliteration, sealed away under layers of ice, as though some cataclysmic act of erasure had swept across the land. Did the ice come only as consequence of drifting continents and altered orbits, or was it hastened by forces more mysterious? Some scholars have whispered that the Younger Dryas impact theory, an event 12,000 years ago that plunged the Earth into sudden cold, could have played its part, freezing a thriving world into oblivion. If so, Antarctica becomes not just a continent, but a tomb for a past age, its guardianship less a choice than a decree of nature or cosmos. The presence of ancient maps deepens the fracture. The Piri Reis chart of 1513, the Oronsefine map of 1531, the Boache map of the 18th century, all hint at southern lands uncannily similar to Antarctica, some without ice, some divided by waterways revealed only by modern instruments. If these maps are fragments of older knowledge, then the guardianship of the wall is not only physical, but temporal, a severing of the present from a memory of earlier civilizations who walked the same earth but saw it differently. Their knowledge survives in shadows, then vanishes again, as if some hidden hand allows only glimpses before erasing the trail. Was the ice wall raised not merely by climate, but by intention, as if to seal away not just land but knowledge itself? It is this idea, that Antarctica conceals intentional secrecy, that casts the 20th century in an eerie glow. The rumors surrounding Nazi Germany's Antarctic expeditions linger like ghosts. In 1938-39, the German ship Schwabenland journeyed south, launching planes to survey and map parts of Queen Maud Land, an effort far larger than the official narrative of scientific exploration suggested. Some claim the expedition sought more than territory, that it pursued legends of hidden sanctuaries within the ice, rumors of geothermal valleys that might house secret bases. After the war, whispers spread of a German presence in the south, beyond the reach of Allied power, hidden by the very guardianship of the ice. Though mainstream historians dismiss these tales, their persistence speaks to a deeper unease. Antarctica remains a stage for secrets too vast or too fragile to fit into official history. Operation Highjump, launched by the United States in 1946, adds fuel to this fire. Admiral Richard E. Byrd commanded the largest Antarctic expedition in history, thousands of men, aircraft carriers, submarines, and planes. Officially, its mission was scientific. Yet within months, the operation ended abruptly, with losses unexplained, rumors swirling of encounters that went far beyond mere weather. Byrd's later statements about potential threats from polar regions, forces capable of overwhelming any defense, were absorbed into silence, explained away as exaggerations. But what if those words were not hyperbole? What if they were the careful testimony of a man who glimpsed the guardianship in its truest form? Something encountered there, whether natural, technological, or other, may have been judged too destabilizing to disclose. The treaty that followed in 1959, banning military presence and sealing the continent from possession, begins to look less like altruism and more like compliance. It is as if humanity collectively acknowledged the guardianship, formalizing its terms in law. Meanwhile, science continued to probe, and each revelation unsettled as much as it enlightened. The discovery of Lake Vostok beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice shook the imagination. a lake sealed off for millions of years, larger than Ontario, with water that had never seen light. Its very existence speaks of isolation so absolute it feels intentional. When drilling efforts pierced its outer layers, speculation grew. What organisms, what forms of life might persist in its black waters? Some researchers found microbial traces in nearby ice, signs that life endures even in the depths. But beyond the biology, there is the symbolic weight. A vast, hidden reservoir, untouched by time, held in perfect guardianship. The wall does not merely guard the continent's surface. It conceals oceans beneath, worlds within worlds. These hidden valleys and lakes echo myths of subterranean realms, from Agartha in esoteric traditions to the caverns of Hopi legends, where ancient people retreated to survive cataclysm. The parallels are uncanny. If myths across cultures recall hidden sanctuaries beneath the earth, could Antarctica embody such memory, a place where myth and geology converge? The guardianship of the ice wall would then be the guardianship of the underworld itself, keeping the threshold sealed until the appointed time. Yet there are voices of resistance, voices that dismiss all of this as projection. Geologists remind us that Antarctica's ice is explained by tectonics and climate cycles. Historians point out that early maps could be misread or misinterpreted. Political analysts insist the treaty was simply pragmatic, avoiding disputes over an inhospitable land. These explanations soothe, but they do not silence. For each rebuttal, new anomalies emerge. Why does the continent yield fossils of temperate forests beneath kilometers of ice? Why do radar surveys reveal mountains as tall as the Alps, valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, all hidden from view? Why do accounts from explorers oscillate between awe and guarded restraint, as though they describe more than they are permitted to say? The guardianship resists closure, surviving even denial. Conflict lies precisely here, between rational explanation and the persistence of mystery. To choose one side is to simplify. To live in the tension is to confront the full measure of Antarctica's enigma. Perhaps the guardianship thrives on this tension, feeding on our uncertainty, ensuring that the wall remains both barrier and mirror. In its reflection, humanity sees both its hunger for knowledge and its inability to accept boundaries. The wall teaches by resisting. The guardianship holds not by force, but by silence, which proves stronger than conquest. And so the climax of this unfolding riddle is not a discovery, but a recognition. Antarctica is less a continent than a covenant. Its ice wall is not only frozen water, but frozen time, holding back epochs, civilizations, truths. Its guardianship is written in treaty, in geology, in myth, in the auroras that veil its nights. And through all of this, the unanswered questions echo louder than the answers. Perhaps this is deliberate. Perhaps revelation is not the point. The wall teaches patience, humility, endurance. It reminds us that not all mysteries are meant to be solved, not yet. As the polar winds howl across the endless plain and the aurora arcs above in silent flame, the wall glitters as though alive. It is not only an obstacle, it is a presence. It stands in defiance of human ambition, reflecting back our desire to know, to own, to possess. Yet in that defiance lies its greatest gift, the recognition that some truths are not for us to seize but to await. The guardians endure, the silence speaks, and the continent remains sealed. Antarctica holds its secret, not because it is forgotten, but because it waits. its ice wall gleaming like a threshold at the edge of time itself. The weight of Antarctica presses not only on the physical world, but on the imagination, as though the ice itself exerts gravity over human thought. It is not simply the vastness of the continent that unsettles, but the way it withdraws even as we approach. Every attempt to measure, to map, to explain seems to reveal more layers of secrecy, each one colder and deeper than the last. The guardianship of the ice wall is not only an image of defense, but of concealment, an intelligence of silence that does not deny outright, but instead compels endless speculation. And in that speculation, humanity begins to see itself mirrored, vulnerable, and uncertain at the edge of the world. Some of the most haunting fragments of this enigma emerge not from myth, but from science itself. In 2018, researchers published findings from radar scans that showed massive anomalies beneath the ice, regions that seemed to absorb rather than reflect signals, as if something vast and dense was hidden below. To scientists, such anomalies might suggest unusual geology, or perhaps vast ice caves warmed by geothermal energy. But for others, the very presence of the unexplained rekindles old suspicions that Antarctica is not simply nature's frozen archive, but a place of intentional guardianship, where something more than ice and stone lies preserved. The guardianship here is expressed not in mythological figures, but in the stubborn refusal of the land to yield to clarity. Technology, no matter how advanced, seems to falter at the threshold. Consider, too, the curious accounts of compasses spinning erratically, of aircraft instruments faltering, of strange magnetic anomalies reported since the earliest flights over the continent. These are not inventions of conspiracy alone. They are noted in aviation records and research logs. The magnetic poles shift, wander, and in Antarctica, the distortions become particularly acute. What if this disorientation is not incidental, but protective, part of the guardianship itself? The very act of orientation, finding one's way, is destabilized, leaving explorers adrift in a landscape that does not wish to be penetrated. It is as though the continent itself exerts an agency, ensuring that intrusion remains confused, paths always uncertain, horizons always deceptive. The Cold War era only intensified the aura of concealment. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959, still hailed as one of the rare examples of global cooperation, is often framed as a triumph of peace. Yet it is worth asking why, in a century of relentless competition for land and resources, nations agreed so swiftly to leave Antarctica untouched. Oil reserves, mineral wealth, vast fisheries, all lie beneath or around the continent, yet they remain legally sealed, protected by an agreement more enduring than most political alliances. Was this treaty truly born of altruism, or was it a recognition, quietly shared, that the continent was not theirs to claim? Perhaps the guardianship did not need to enforce its law with force. Perhaps humanity itself, having glimpsed just enough, submitted willingly to silence. One cannot ignore the echoes of this pattern in ancient traditions. The Book of Enoch, long excluded from biblical canon, describes fallen angels bound in the ends of the earth, imprisoned beneath mountains of ice until the time of judgment. In Greek myth, the Titans were confined beneath Tartarus, hidden away where mortals could not reach. Again and again, across cultures, one encounters the motif of power sealed at the margins of the world, guarded until a future age. When one stands before Antarctica's wall of ice, these stories cease to feel allegorical. They feel like ancestral memories, shadows of encounters reframed as myth. Could it be that what humanity once knew as gods, titans, or watchers were in fact the earlier intimations of the same guardians who now keep watch over the frozen South? Even mainstream discoveries, when viewed through this lens, take on unsettling dimensions. The detection of vast subglacial lakes, rivers flowing in darkness beneath kilometers of ice, suggests an unseen world beneath the continent's surface. In 2019, researchers confirmed a network of water moving under the West Antarctic ice sheet, a circulation system hidden from human sight. To science, this is a marvel of geology and hydrology. To the imagination, it suggests more: a labyrinth of hidden spaces, untouched by modern humanity, possibly sheltering remnants of earlier epochs. If microbial life can survive in these depths, then what else might endure, preserved in silence until the guardians decide to release it? The wall may not guard only the continent's edge, but its very underworld, sealing life itself in a frozen chrysalis. At times, the guardianship appears to manifest through absence. When images arise online of supposed anomalies, pyramidal structures, geometric shadows, colossal openings in the ice, they often vanish as quickly as they appear. Explanations follow: natural formations, image glitches, tricks of light. Yet the rhythm of appearance and disappearance, revelation and retraction, feels curiously deliberate. It is as if fragments of truth are permitted to surface only briefly before being buried again, leaving behind not certainty, but yearning. The guardianship does not eradicate the questions. It sustains them, ensuring that the hunger for knowledge never disappears, but never finds fulfillment either. This tension, this endless circling, is itself the lesson. In this conflict between revelation and denial, between science and speculation, humanity confronts the limits of its own ambition. We are a species obsessed with unveiling, with mapping, with owning. Yet here, at the bottom of the world, we are forced to accept resistance. The wall does not collapse before our tools. It outlasts them. The guardianship remains intact, and in doing so it teaches humility. Perhaps this is why the mystery endures so powerfully, because Antarctica refuses to be assimilated into the narrative of progress. It stands apart, like an ancient witness, unbroken and unyielding, a reminder that not all of Earth is ours to command. The climax of this paradox is not in the revelations of conspiracy, nor in the denials of science, but in the silence itself. The guardianship of the wall has never been about spectacle. It has always been about restraint. The ice does not speak loudly. It whispers through anomalies, through half-seen maps, through legends half-remembered. And in those whispers it unsettles us more than any declaration could. What could demand such guardianship, such secrecy, such silence, a resource, a remnant of an older civilization, a truth about the Earth itself that would destabilize all we think we know? The possibilities multiply, and yet the wall holds them all at bay, shimmering like a mirror at the edge of human comprehension. As the long twilight stretches and the auroras bend across the frozen horizon, the wall seems less like a natural structure and more like a threshold of the mind. It invites approach but denies entry. It allows speculation but forbids certainty. And in this paradox lies its enduring power. Perhaps the guardians are not figures hidden in the ice, but the ice itself, a form of memory beyond our reach. Perhaps the true guardianship is not over the land, but over us, ensuring that we remain suspended between wonder and ignorance, compelled to ask questions but restrained from answers. The continent does not only guard its secrets, it guards the human spirit from the consequences of knowing too soon. And so the ice wall endures, luminous in the half-light, both fortress and mirror. Those who approach it leave changed, burdened with questions they cannot shake. Those who study it circle endlessly around its enigmas, discovering more unknowns than answers. The guardianship holds, and the silence remains alive. Perhaps this is its deepest lesson, that mystery itself is a form of truth, one that cannot be dissolved into clarity but must be carried like a weight. The wall teaches us to wait, to wonder, to accept that some revelations belong not to the present age, but to the horizon of time. The southern continent remains a mirror of paradox, a place where the human need for clarity collides with the planet's insistence on silence. Antarctica is not simply hidden by its ice, it is guarded by it. The wall rises like a frozen cathedral, a monument not to what we know, but to what we are not yet permitted to know, even as expeditions, treaties, and technologies attempt to pierce its veil. The guardianship holds, adapting to each intrusion. It is not passive resistance, but a force that seems to shift with the times, revealing only fragments, concealing the rest, ensuring that the heart of the mystery remains beyond reach. It is no surprise that the 20th century, steeped in secrecy and power struggles, found Antarctica an irresistible stage for speculation. During the years of the Cold War, intelligence services and military strategists quietly considered the southern pole not only as an empty frontier, but as a potential stronghold. Rumors of subterranean bases, of hidden technologies preserved under ice, of experiments carried out beyond the eyes of the world, spread like frost through both public imagination and classified corridors. The guardianship of the wall seemed to acquire political shape. To some, the continent became less a geographical puzzle than a stage for forces unseen, perhaps even unacknowledged by the governments themselves. Whispers of lost civilizations wove through this fabric of secrecy. Theosophists in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, inspired by Eastern traditions and esoteric visions, spoke of Lemuria, a sunken continent of wisdom, fragments of which might remain preserved in polar regions. Though mainstream scholars dismiss such theories as speculative mythology, they resonate strangely with geological evidence that Antarctica was once warm, green, and habitable. If a civilization had flourished there, it would not be myth but memory. The guardianship of the wall would then become an act of preservation, sealing away not just a land, but a culture, an inheritance that humanity is not yet prepared to claim. This possibility finds echoes in ancient texts. The Mahabharata and Ramayana describe celestial wars and weapons of devastating power, suggesting cycles of destruction long before recorded history. Could such accounts be distorted memories of civilizations erased by catastrophe, their remnants buried in places now inaccessible? If so, Antarctica's wall might be more than geological happenstance. It might be the last rampart guarding traces of those forgotten epochs. Fossils of tropical forests beneath kilometers of ice, radar images of mountain ranges taller than the Alps hidden below the surface. These are not fantasies. They are facts, and in their starkness they blur the line between myth and science, inviting questions that official explanations never fully quiet. In this sense, the guardianship is less about denial than about timing. Ancient traditions across the world describe ages of revelation and concealment, knowledge withdrawn when humanity is unready, returned when the cycle turns again. The Hindu concept of the yugas, the Greek notion of ages of man, the Maya calendar, all suggest that human history unfolds in waves, not in a straight line. Perhaps Antarctica is one of the places where this rhythm is written into the Earth itself. The wall is a clock as much as a barrier, measuring not hours but epochs, sealing its secrets until the right alignment of time and consciousness. Mainstream voices, of course, counter these ideas with pragmatism. They remind us that ice sheets form through natural processes, that subglacial landscapes are the result of tectonic forces, that treaties exist to protect fragile ecosystems. Their reasoning is sound, but the persistence of anomalies gnaws at the edges of certainty. Why do some satellite images reveal geometric shadows, suggestive of architecture, only to disappear in later revisions? Why do explorers and aviators describe sensations of being watched, of oppressive unease, as though the land itself had presence? Why did Admiral Byrd speak of threats and powers beyond imagination, only to retreat into silence? These fragments do not resolve into a single narrative, but their pattern is unmistakable. Antarctica resists closure. The guardianship thrives on this ambiguity, sustaining a space where wonder refuses to be extinguished. It is in the conflict between denial and speculation that the mystery acquires its greatest power. The skeptic insists that myths are projections, anomalies are errors, and treaties are pragmatic. The seeker points to fossils, maps, and testimonies that refuse easy dismissal. Neither side conquers the other. Instead, the guardianship of the wall deepens, feeding on the tension itself. The continent becomes a theater not of answers, but of unresolved questions, a reminder that human knowledge remains provisional, partial, and fragile. The climax of this paradox may lie in the human response rather than in the land itself. Antarctica compels humility, yet it also provokes obsession. Researchers risk lives to drill into lakes sealed for millions of years, to scan hidden mountains, to measure shifting ice. Conspiracy theorists spin webs of alien bases and hidden technologies, filling the vacuum left by silence. Governments maintain stations, their presence both fragile and heavily regulated, as though acknowledging the continent's importance without daring to exploit it. Every action, every attempt, circles around the same truth. The wall stands, and its guardianship holds. It is not defeated. It does not yield. It does not explain. It endures, and in enduring, it teaches. Perhaps the deepest lesson is that not all mysteries exist to be solved. Some exist to be lived with, to shape our sense of proportion, to remind us of what lies beyond human reach. The ice wall, gleaming under auroras that ripple like veils, embodies this lesson. It confronts us with our hunger for clarity and shows us instead the power of silence. It reflects our ambition and answers with patience. It reveals fragments, then retreats, leaving us suspended between awe and uncertainty. And as the southern night extends its long embrace, the wall glows faintly in the ghost light of the moon. The sea crashes against its frozen cliffs. Explorers retreat from its edges. Satellites pass above its crown. And yet the mystery remains intact. The guardians do not falter. They are not weakened by questions, nor undone by instruments. They continue, silent and inscrutable as they have for ages. And in their endurance lies the most haunting truth, that the world still contains places where we are not sovereign, where knowledge is not a right but a gift withheld, where silence itself is the most powerful teacher. The ice wall endures, the guardianship holds, and the question echoes once more into the frozen air. If the continent is waiting, what is it waiting for? The ice wall does not crumble, nor does it bend to human ambition. It stands unmoved, like an ancient witness, while centuries of ships, aircraft, treaties, and technologies swirl at its edges. Each generation imagines itself closer to unraveling its secret, yet the wall remains a threshold. Those who approach it leave not with answers, but with a heavier burden of questions. The guardianship of the wall has never been about denial. It is about endurance. It survives the collapse of empires, the rise of science, the flood of myths, the noise of speculation. And in surviving, it teaches a lesson written not in words but in silence, that some mysteries will not be seized but must wait until their appointed hour. What is perhaps most unsettling is the pattern of revelations that appear and vanish, as though orchestrated. Satellite images have circulated showing enormous openings in the ice, cavernous entrances that seem less like geological accidents than deliberate passages. Almost as quickly, these images are explained away or removed, dismissed as optical illusions or digital anomalies. The rhythm is familiar. Disclosure followed by disappearance, curiosity followed by dismissal. Yet the echo remains. If nothing lies beyond the wall, why does the shadow of geometry keep returning? Why do these traces haunt the edges of the official record, surfacing briefly before retreating into silence again? It is as though the guardianship itself allows glimpses, not to satisfy, but to sustain wonder. The presence of vast subglacial landscapes intensifies this sense. Beneath the ice, radar reveals valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, mountain ranges rivaling the Alps, rivers and lakes in complete darkness. These discoveries are facts, measured and published, and yet they feel uncanny. To imagine such immensity hidden beneath the frozen surface is to confront the possibility of entire worlds sealed away. Some scientists speak cautiously of ancient life forms preserved in isolation, of microbial communities untouched for millions of years. Others wonder whether the layers conceal traces of something larger, remnants of civilizations erased by time. Mainstream voices resist the leap from geology to myth, yet the human imagination is difficult to restrain. The guardianship of the wall, by concealing so much, ensures that imagination thrives where certainty cannot. This tension resonates with echoes of older ages. In many mythologies, the edges of the world were described as guarded realms, not to be crossed until humanity was ready. The Norse imagined Jotunheim, a land beyond icy rivers where giants dwelt, unreachable to mortals. The Greeks spoke of Hyperborea, a land beyond the north wind, hidden and eternal. Hebrew Apocrypha described watchers chained at the ends of the earth, their knowledge withheld until the final age. These traditions, scattered across cultures, converge on the same image, a forbidden threshold, guarded by forces beyond human grasp. When these archetypes align with the physical presence of Antarctica's wall, the result is unnerving. The guardians of myth seem to have found their mirror in the guardians of ice. Conflict arises because the human mind recoils from uncertainty. We are not content with the silence of the wall. We demand explanations, scientific, conspiratorial, esoteric. And yet every explanation falters. The skeptic dismisses anomalies as error. The believer insists on hidden civilizations or otherworldly presences. Between them, the guardianship persists, unaffected by argument, indifferent to belief. The ice wall is neither confirmed nor denied by words. It is. And in its being, it resists us. Even political history takes on a strange hue in this light. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 remains one of the most unusual documents in modern history. Nations that otherwise contested every frontier of the globe agreed unanimously to keep Antarctica free from ownership, war, and exploitation. This is often praised as idealism, but perhaps it is something else. Compliance. A recognition, unspoken but understood, that the continent was not theirs to claim. Whether out of reverence, fear, or knowledge of what lay beyond the wall, the nations of the earth effectively formalized the guardianship in law. In doing so, they transformed the continent into a kind of shrine, untouchable, preserved, forbidden. Still, the hunger for what lies behind the veil has never faded. Theories multiply, weaving together fragments of history, testimony, and speculation. Some argue that remnants of an ancient advanced culture remain preserved, sealed away like insects in amber. Others imagine portals to inner realms, hollow earth sanctuaries echoing myths of Agartha and Shambhala. More pragmatic minds point to natural resources, oil, minerals, freshwater, locked beneath the ice, whose scale might destabilize global power if revealed. But beyond each explanation lies the deeper unease. Why has the wall endured so completely against intrusion? Why has the guardianship never cracked, even under the weight of the most determined ambition? The climax of the Antarctic enigma lies not in discovery, but in recognition. The wall is not simply an obstacle, it is a paradox. It invites approach but denies entry. It teases revelation but enforces silence. It reveals fragments but conceals the whole. In doing so, it performs a role older than human memory. It preserves the balance between knowledge and mystery. If too much is revealed too soon, the balance collapses. Perhaps this is why the guardianship endures, not as punishment but as protection, preserving both what lies beyond and those who seek it. The auroras sweep across the southern night like veils of living light, their colors bending and dissolving into the ice below. In their glow, the wall gleams as if breathing, a presence both alive and indifferent. Ships that have turned back, aircraft that have faltered, explorers who have vanished, all are folded into its silence. The guardianship does not explain itself, it does not justify, it simply endures, as it has for ages. And so humanity circles the mystery, year after year, century after century, compelled to wonder but forbidden to know. Perhaps this is the greatest function of the wall, not to conceal a secret, but to teach the meaning of waiting, to remind us that not all knowledge belongs to the present, that some truths are sealed in time as well as space. The guardianship may not be broken by force, but it may one day dissolve by grace when the cycle of ages turns once more. Until then, the wall endures. The guardians remain unnamed, invisible, perhaps even impersonal. Yet their silence carries weight. It is a silence heavier than speech, older than memory, stronger than conquest. And in that silence lies the most haunting question of all. Is the wall keeping us out, or is it keeping something else in? The ice stretches beyond sight. a white desert that is not emptiness but concealment. In the silence of Antarctica, even time feels frozen, layered into strata of memory the way snow compacts into ancient ice. To stand before the wall is to feel that weight pressing not only against the land, but against thought itself. It is not merely a barrier of frozen water. It is an archive, a veil, perhaps even a prison. For centuries, it has remained untouched, inviolate, guarded by forces visible and invisible. Each generation that approaches believes it is the first, yet the wall has outlasted them all, whispering a truth they cannot name. What is sealed there in the thickness of ice? The question has never left human imagination. In the late 20th century, whispers grew louder as scientific surveys deepened their reach. Radar instruments mapped the hidden terrain below, revealing mountain ranges larger than the Alps, valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, rivers flowing in silence, lakes sealed for millions of years. The mere fact of their existence unsettles. They are landscapes no human has seen, entire worlds beneath our world, protected by the wall above. The guardianship here is profound. It does not simply prevent access, it erases awareness, keeping the most immense features of the planet unknown until fragments slip through the cracks of discovery. Among the most striking revelations is Lake Vostok. Trapped beneath 4 kilometers of ice, it remains untouched by light and atmosphere, sealed in a vault of pressure and darkness. When Russian scientists drilled close enough to sample its waters, they found microbial traces, evidence that life endures even under conditions thought impossible. To science, this is a breakthrough in astrobiology, a glimpse of how life might persist on frozen worlds beyond Earth. But beneath the celebration lingers unease. If microbial life thrives there, what else might endure? What relics of earlier epochs, biological or otherwise, might be preserved in those abyssal waters? The guardianship of the wall is not only about distance, it is about depth. It conceals not just continents but possibilities, seeds of history and life that may alter everything we believe about origins and endings. There is also the matter of anomalies, the fragments that slip between official explanations. In 2016, NASA detected unusual gravitational fluctuations beneath the ice, suggesting the presence of an enormous mass buried deep below. To geologists, it might indicate an ancient asteroid impact basin, a scar from an event millions of years old. But others wonder, could it be something else, something not geological, a remnant of forgotten technology, a monument swallowed by ice? The guardianship is not weakened by such speculation. It is strengthened. Each anomaly fuels new questions, yet answers recede into the silence, swallowed like light into snow. The political history of Antarctica echoes this same pattern. During the Cold War, when competition for dominance reached every corner of the globe, Antarctica became the one place declared neutral, untouchable. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 still stands as an anomaly in human affairs, a rare pact of restraint. Its restrictions go beyond mere practicality. They ban mining, militarization, permanent settlement. They preserve the continent in stasis. Nations, otherwise unwilling to compromise, agreed without war. Why? Was it only because the land was hostile and barren, or because something there demanded guardianship beyond human power? Treaties are human law, but here they feel like submission to a deeper law already inscribed in the ice. If one listens to the currents of myth, the resonance is uncanny. In Tibetan traditions, the hidden land of Shambhala is veiled from the unworthy, accessible only to those whose inner state matches the purity of the place. In Norse cosmology, Niflheim lies sealed in mist and ice, a realm where ancient forces are bound. The Hebrews imagined watchers confined in chains beneath the earth's extremities until the end of time. Again and again, cultures describe forbidden places sealed at the edges of the world, guarded by barriers that only future ages may cross. Antarctica is the physical reflection of those archetypes. Its wall is real, its guardianship tangible, yet it echoes with mythological memory. Perhaps humanity has always known of such a threshold, and simply given it different names through the ages. The conflict between science and speculation is not a flaw. It is the very essence of the Antarctic mystery. Science insists on geology, tectonics, climate cycles. It explains the ice in terms of shifting plates and planetary orbits. Yet speculation insists on the persistence of anomalies, maps showing ice-free coasts, expeditions ending abruptly, testimonies whispered, then silenced. Neither fully cancels the other. Instead, they create a space of uncertainty, where mystery endures stronger than proof. The guardianship thrives in this space. It is not undone by explanation, nor validated by speculation. It simply continues, unbroken, refusing to resolve into clarity. And yet, fragments of climax break through. Admiral Byrd's enigmatic remarks after Operation Highjump, of threats capable of striking the United States from the poles with terrifying speed. The sudden end of the operation months before its schedule. The quiet agreement among nations soon after to lock the continent in neutrality. Each of these alone might be explained away. Together they form a pattern. Something was glimpsed, something encountered, and though the details were never spoken, the world responded with silence. The guardianship does not reveal itself in spectacle, but in absence. What matters is not what was said, but what was left unsaid. As twilight drapes itself across the southern horizon, auroras flicker like veils of green fire above the wall. The land below remains inscrutable, its secrets preserved. Humanity circles it endlessly, through treaties, through technology, through myth, yet never enters. The guardianship holds. It allows approach, but not entry, questions, but not answers, glimpses, but never clarity. It teaches patience, not as a virtue, but as a condition. To live with the wall is to live with limits, to acknowledge that not all mysteries yield to will. Perhaps this is the deeper function of the Antarctic enigma. It is less about what lies behind the wall than about what the wall does to us. It unsettles certainty. It strips away arrogance. It compels humility in the face of silence. It teaches that mystery itself is a form of truth, not a failure of knowledge, but a dimension of existence. The guardianship does not diminish us. It reminds us of our place in a universe older and stranger than we can yet bear. And so, the ice wall glows under the shifting auroras, an eternal threshold. Its cliffs rise, white and unbroken against the dark sea. Beneath it, mountains sleep, valleys sigh, lakes dream in darkness. Above it, treaties hold, satellites pass, myths whisper. Through it all, the guardians endure. They do not explain, they do not reveal, they do not surrender. They simply wait, silent and patient, until the appointed time. The wall endures, the silence deepens, and the question lingers like a shadow across the snow. Is the secret hidden in the ice, or is the ice itself the secret? The wall of ice has stood for ages, unyielding, indifferent to the passage of time. It rises not only as a geographic boundary, but as a symbol of something older than human memory, something woven into the structure of the world itself. To face it is to confront silence that is not emptiness but presence, a silence so vast it presses against thought and lingers in the marrow. Across centuries, sailors, aviators, scientists, and storytellers have brushed against its threshold, and each has returned marked by the encounter. They return not with revelation, but with shadows, fragments, questions that multiply instead of resolve. The guardianship of the ice wall has always been this: not to deny knowledge outright, but to hold it just beyond reach, ensuring that mystery endures. When one traces the history of human interaction with Antarctica, a rhythm emerges. Expeditions set forth with ambition and return with restraint. Cook, Bellingshausen, Wilkes, Byrd, all wrote in language that oscillates between awe and unease, as though they were compelled to confess the immensity of what they saw but forbidden from speaking the whole of it. Later, treaties and scientific surveys continued the rhythm. Glimpses of revelation quickly veiled again. Even the most concrete discoveries, the hidden mountain ranges, the subglacial lakes, the fossilized forests, become more unsettling than satisfying. They do not close the mystery, they widen it. Every fact uncovers another question, and in this way the guardianship sustains itself. The presence of myth in this landscape cannot be ignored. From Hyperborea to Shambhala, from the watchers bound at the earth's ends to the titans sealed beneath ice, humanity has always imagined forbidden realms guarded until a distant age. Such myths, scattered across cultures, converge uncannily with the reality of Antarctica, a vast, inhospitable land, inaccessible, withheld. It is as if the continent itself is the physical embodiment of those archetypes, an ancient memory made manifest. To see the ice wall is to feel the weight of that inheritance, to recognize that myth and matter have converged in one place at the edge of the world. In recent decades, the guardianship has only grown stronger. The Antarctic Treaty remains intact, a rare covenant among nations that otherwise compete relentlessly. While wars have scarred every other continent, this one remains sealed, untouchable, preserved in a stasis unlike any other land on Earth. On the surface, this is framed as peace and protection, but beneath it lies unease. Why here? Why this exception? The resources beneath the ice are immense: oil, minerals, freshwater reserves that could shift global power, yet they remain untouched. It is as if humanity collectively agreed not to open a door without ever naming what might be behind it. Such restraint is not typical of our species. It suggests compliance with something deeper than law. Science, too, has been shaped by the guardianship. Instruments probe, satellites scan, drilling projects reach into hidden depths, and yet clarity never arrives. Instead, anomalies multiply: gravitational fluctuations, magnetic distortions, radar echoes of unknown masses. Each discovery excites imagination, only to be quickly cloaked in technical explanation. The cycle repeats endlessly. The guardianship ensures that the continent never fully yields to inquiry. It permits glimpses but denies vision, sustaining a twilight between knowledge and ignorance. The conflict between explanation and suspicion defines the enigma. Rational voices insist that the ice wall is geology, that anomalies are natural, that treaties are practical. They remind us that human imagination is prone to projection, to weaving myth into silence. Yet suspicion persists. Why do maps centuries old depict coasts beneath the ice with uncanny accuracy? Why did expeditions end abruptly with unexplained losses? Why do satellite images of geometric shadows appear, vanish, and reappear? These fragments do not prove hidden civilizations or forbidden technologies, but they refuse dismissal. They hover at the edges of certainty, ensuring that the guardianship is never fully erased. And perhaps this is the true climax of the Antarctic story. Not discovery, but preservation of mystery. The wall of ice is more than a physical structure. It is a condition of being, a reminder that not all frontiers are meant to collapse before human will. It resists conquest, resists ownership, resists final explanation. In doing so, it performs a function older than empires. It teaches humility. It reminds us that silence is not emptiness, but a kind of speech, that waiting is not failure but necessity. The guardianship does not punish, it preserves, keeping truths beyond reach until the age when they may be born. One cannot help but wonder what that age will look like. Will it come with technological mastery, when humanity has the tools to pierce the ice without destroying what lies beneath? Or will it come with inner transformation, when humanity has the patience and wisdom to receive what the wall conceals? The guardianship seems to wait not for machines, but for maturity. It holds its silence not out of malice, but out of purpose. The wall endures because we are not yet ready. The auroras ripple above the cliffs, veils of green and violet trembling across the frozen ramparts. They illuminate the ice, not with clarity but with mystery, casting shadows that seem to shift as though alive. In that light, the wall becomes more than frozen water. It becomes an emblem of thresholds, between known and unknown, seen and unseen, present and forgotten. To gaze upon it is to feel both diminished and expanded, diminished in our power, expanded in our wonder. And so the guardianship continues. The continent remains sealed, the silence unbroken, the wall unyielding. Humanity circles it endlessly, compelled by curiosity, restrained by forces it cannot name. Perhaps one day the veil will lift, perhaps one day the ice will surrender its secret. But until then, the wall stands, luminous in its endurance, echoing the most ancient lesson, that mystery is not an error to be solved, but a truth to be lived. The ice wall glitters beneath the aurora, unbroken, eternal. The guardians remain unseen, and the final question drifts like snow across the endless night. When the wall finally yields, will it reveal the secret we seek, or the secret we fear?